The shout cracked through the garage like a gunshot. Tools froze midair. Engines fell silent. Richard Cole had just stepped inside IronHill Auto Garage for an unannounced inspection, and his eyes locked onto something he clearly wasn't expecting. A black girl, 12 years old, standing by an engine, a wrench still warm in her hand. His voice dripped with disbelief and contempt. A child. In my workshop. During my inspection. The air turned heavy, thick with fear and humiliation. Ariana Brooks didn't flinch. She'd seen that look before, the one that decided her limits before she ever spoke, the one that measured her worth by her age and the color of her skin. What Richard Cole didn't know was that this single moment, meant to publicly shame her, was about to unravel everything he'd built. And if the world has ever underestimated you for who you are, make sure you subscribe now, because this story was never supposed to end the way he thought it would. Richard Cole took one slow step forward, the polished leather of his Italian shoes crunching against the gritty concrete floor, a sound that didn't belong in this place. His tailored suit looked almost unreal under the flickering fluorescent lights, surrounded by oil stains, grease-soaked rags, and the tired faces of men who worked with their hands to survive. He let his gaze travel across the shop, not seeing people, only assets and liabilities, before stopping at the back, where a sleek black Porsche sat under a half-drawn tarp like a forbidden secret. He smiled, thin and deliberate. That car arrived 3 days ago, he said calmly, too calmly. My best mechanics from other branches have already tried. 30 years of experience, certifications on the wall. And yet, the engine won't even start. No diagnostics, no errors, nothing. His voice dipped lower, almost amused. An impossible engine. The word impossible hung in the air like a verdict. Then he turned back to Ariana. Slowly, intentionally, his eyes narrowed, not with curiosity, but with calculation. You seem pretty comfortable around engines, he said, the corner of his mouth curling upward. So, here's my offer. If she can even tell us what's wrong with that Porsche, I'll consider keeping this garage open. The pause that followed was cruel by design, but if she fails, well, you all know how inspections like this usually end. A cold wave rippled through the room. Wrenches tightened in trembling hands. Someone swallowed hard. This wasn't a challenge. It was a trap, wrapped in a smile and sealed with power. Derek Brooks stepped forward instinctively, his voice strained but firm. Mr. Cole, she's just a kid. This isn't fair. The words barely left his mouth before Richard raised a hand, silencing him without even looking. Exactly, he said. Just a kid. And yet she spends every afternoon here, doesn't she? Working on cars, learning from all of you. If that's true, then surely she knows as much as you do, right? A few. Mechanics shifted uncomfortably. No one answered. Richard laughed softly, a sound that carried no humor. I'm simply giving her a chance. And you, Derek, a chance to keep everything you've built. His eyes flicked toward the shop, the lifts, the people. One simple test. Ariana stood perfectly still. The noise faded. The pressure closed in. She felt it in her chest, that familiar tightening, the weight of expectations already decided for her. She didn't look at the car. She didn't look at her father. She stared straight ahead, listening to the unspoken message beneath his words. Fail and prove what I already believe. Succeed and embarrass me in front of everyone. Inside her, something stirred. Not fear, not anger, recognition. This was the same silence she'd felt in classrooms when teachers stopped calling on her. The same pause in stores when security followed her down every aisle. The same look that said she was already judged, already limited. Her fingers curled slowly at her side. She breathed in the sharp scent of oil and metal, grounding herself. Richard Cole thought he was setting a trap. He had no idea he was standing on the edge of one himself. For a long moment, Ariana didn't move. The garage seemed to shrink around her, the walls pressing inward, the silence louder than the machines ever were. She could feel dozens of eyes on her back, heavy with pity, curiosity, doubt. To them, she probably looked small. Too small for the weight Richard Cole had just dropped into the room. But inside her mind, something else was happening, something far quieter and far more dangerous. She had been here before, not in this garage, not with this car, but in moments that felt exactly the same. In classrooms where her hand stayed raised a little too long before the teacher looked past her. In stores where security followed her steps instead of offering help. In conversations where adults smiled politely while already deciding she couldn't possibly understand. Every time, the pattern was the same. They never saw her thinking. They never noticed how she listened, how she watched, how she remembered. Ariana's eyes drifted. Not to the men, not to Richard, but to the machines around her. She noticed the faint clicking sound from a compressor that had been off for minutes. The way the fluorescent light flickered every 7 seconds, not 8. The thin layer of dust on the Porsche's hood, disturbed only once since it arrived. Details most people filtered out without realizing it. Details that always told the truth if you knew how to read them. Her father's voice echoed faintly in her head, telling her not to stay late, not to touch what she didn't fully understand. Teachers telling her she was bright but not exceptional. Neighbors calling her curious, as if curiosity was the ceiling of her potential. They were all wrong, and she had known it for a long time. She just hadn't known when she would be forced to prove it. Richard Cole cleared his throat, clearly enjoying the suspense. He expected tears, panic, excuses, maybe even a quiet retreat that would confirm everything he already believed. He saw this as entertainment, a public lesson disguised as generosity, a child put in her place, a workforce reminded who held the power. Ariana finally lifted her head. Her gaze met his, steady and unflinching. There was no defiance in her expression, no bravado, just clarity, the kind that comes when a decision has already been made long before the moment arrives. Her voice when she spoke was calm, almost soft. "I'll do it." The words landed heavier than a shout. A ripple of murmurs moved through the garage. Richard blinked, then laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Of course you will," he said, clapping his hands once, as if a show had officially begun. The circus was open, and he was certain he already knew the ending. What he didn't see was the stillness in Ariana's eyes, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm breaks. Ariana walked toward the Porsche without rushing, her steps light but deliberate, as if she were entering a familiar room rather than facing a public trial. The car loomed over her, sleek and silent, its polished surface reflecting the harsh lights above. To anyone watching, it might have looked like a child pretending to be confident. But confidence wasn't what guided her hands. Precision was. She began the way she always did, not with guesswork, not with shortcuts. Ignition first. Her fingers hovered, then settled, feeling for resistance, listening for what the metal wasn't saying. Fuel system next. She leaned in slightly, eyes narrowing, catching a scent that didn't belong, a subtle absence where pressure should have left a trace. Then, electrical. Always electrical. Her movements followed a clean, invisible sequence, one learned not from imitation, but from understanding. Around her, the garage held its breath. Frank Sullivan shifted his weight, arms crossed, eyes locked on Ariana's hands. 30 years in the business had trained him to spot fakes instantly. Kids who mimicked motions without knowing why, adults who hid uncertainty behind speed. This was different. She wasn't touching things at random. She wasn't searching. She was confirming. Step by step, exactly the way a seasoned diagnostic specialist would, except without the nervous tics that usually came with pressure. Richard Cole scoffed from behind her, but the sound lacked conviction now. He had expected chaos, fumbling, maybe a wrong tool dropped to the floor. Instead, he saw control. Silence stretched. No one laughed. Ariana paused in front of a small black module tucked deeper than most would bother to look. Her hand hovered for a fraction of a second, then pointed. That. Her voice was quiet, almost conversational. Has anyone checked whether this module is sending the correct signal back to the main system? The question landed like a stone dropped into water. Frank's brow furrowed. He took a step closer, then another. No one answered, not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't. That part was new. Too new. Installed in models that hadn't been fully covered in most training programs. They'd glanced at it, dismissed it, moved on. Richard cleared his throat sharply. "Of course we checked that," he snapped, too quickly. "We checked everything." But Ariana was already nodding, not in agreement, but in recognition. Recognition of a lie told out of habit, not certainty. She crouched lower, tracing the wiring with her eyes rather than her fingers. The connections told a story, one that didn't line up with the assumptions everyone else had made. Frank noticed her expression change. Not confusion, focus, the kind that appears when pieces begin to align. The murmurs died. Even the skeptics had gone quiet now. No jokes, no commentary, just the sound of breathing and the faint hum of electricity in the walls. Grown men who had spent their lives fixing broken machines were suddenly unsure of their own conclusions. Ariana straightened slowly. She didn't smile. She didn't look proud. She looked certain. And in that moment, the most unsettling realization crept through the room. This wasn't a child guessing. This was someone seeing something they had all missed. The adults didn't speak. They didn't interrupt. For the first time since Richard Cole walked in, the power in the room had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Richard Cole broke the silence with a laugh that echoed too loudly in the garage. "So, where did you learn all this?" he asked, tilting his head, pretending to be curious while sharpening the insult. "Let me guess. YouTube." The word rolled off his tongue like a punchline. YouTube University, fixing a car worth more than this entire shop. A few uneasy chuckles followed, thin and forced, the kind people use when they're afraid to disagree with power. Ariana didn't look up right away. She stayed crouched beside the engine, eyes still tracing lines of wiring, as if the comment hadn't even reached her. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "Technical manuals, the ones in the office. Some of them aren't even used anymore." That got a reaction. Derek's head snapped up. Frank's eyes widened slightly. "Those manuals are for certified mechanics," Derek said quietly, more surprised than angry. "Half of them are written in technical English." Ariana nodded once. "I know. That's why I translate the hard parts." She said it simply, the way someone describes tying their shoes. Phone apps, online forums, late nights, pausing videos frame by frame, rewatching the same section until the logic made sense. Richard shook his head, grinning. This keeps getting better. A 12-year-old teaching herself advanced automotive systems with subtitles and internet videos. He turned to the others, spreading his hands. "Are you hearing this? Engineers with degrees couldn't figure this out, but she thinks a few videos and some Google searches will do the job." Ariana finally stood, wiping her hands on a rag. She met his eyes, not defensively, not proudly. Just honestly. "I don't watch random videos," she said. "I look for patterns. Updates. Service bulletins most people skip because they're too new. I read comments from mechanics in other states who are seeing the same failures." She paused, then added quietly, "And I don't stop when something doesn't make sense. I keep going until it does." The room shifted again. The laughter didn't return this time. Frank took a step closer to the car, replaying her words in his head. Patterns, other states, same failures. That wasn't how amateurs talked. That was how investigators talked. Richard's smile tightened. "You're saying the rest of us missed something obvious?" Ariana shook her head. "No. I'm saying you were taught to look in the wrong places." A dangerous sentence, the kind that usually gets ignored. But no one interrupted her. She gestured toward the engine. "Technology changes faster than training programs. Most people trust what they were taught 10 years ago. I don't have that problem. I only know what works now." For the first time, doubt flickered across Richard's face, quick but undeniable. "If you're starting to feel like this isn't going the way you expected, drop a comment and tell me what you think is about to happen." Because even in that moment, Ariana wasn't proving she was smart. She was proving something far more threatening. She wasn't limited by the same assumptions that kept everyone else comfortable. Ariana took a slow breath, then looked up. "I'll need internet access," she said. "Just a few minutes." The sentence was simple, but it cut through the room like a blade. Richard laughed, sharp and dismissive. "Internet access? For what exactly?" Ariana didn't rise to the tone. "To download the reprogramming interface. To reset the digital signatures." The word signatures landed hard. Frank's eyes flicked up. Digital signatures weren't common knowledge. Not yet. Richard's smile faltered for the first time. "You're not touching the software of that car," he snapped. "That Porsche is worth more than this entire garage." Ariana met his gaze. "Then you should want to know why it won't start." Silence. Thick. Dangerous. Frank stepped forward. "Let her try," he said quietly. "If she's wrong, nothing changes. If she's right..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Richard hesitated, jaw tight, pride wrestling with control. Finally, with a sharp gesture, he nodded. 5 minutes. Ariana opened her laptop. The screen lit her face in pale blue as lines of code began to move. Not randomly, purposefully. Her fingers flew with a confidence that made the older mechanics exchange looks. This wasn't curiosity anymore. This was fluency. She connected to the diagnostic port, bypassed the surface checks, went deeper than anyone in the room had dared. "This model uses a layered authentication system," she said. eyes locked on the screen. If the control module doesn't recognize the correct digital signature, it shuts down the entire ignition. Safety protocol, theft prevention. Frank leaned closer. You're saying the car thinks it's been tampered with? Ariana nodded. But it hasn't. Not in the way you think. Code streamed faster now. Her voice stayed calm, almost distant. This isn't a random failure. It's programmed behavior. A few keystrokes later, she froze the screen. Look. She turned the laptop so they could see. A timestamp, a trigger condition, 90 days after first ignition, every time. Richard's face drained of color. That's not possible, he said too quickly. That's a coincidence. Ariana shook her head. 17 identical cars. Same failure, same timing, same software fingerprint, all routed through partner garages. The room shifted from tension to shock. She opened another window. A list of serial numbers appeared, scrolling past names of cities and dates. Frank's breath caught. My God, Ariana didn't stop. These cars were designed to fail, bought back cheap. One line of code removed, then resold as refurbished at triple the margin. Richard took a step back. You don't know what you're talking about. Ariana looked up, eyes steady. I do, because I traced the pattern upstream. She clicked again. Internal documents filled the screen. Contracts, instructions, payment records. And here's where it gets personal. She highlighted a name. Richard Cole, you received a commission for every car declared unrepairable by your network. 15%. His mouth opened. No sound came out. Frank turned slowly, fury replacing disbelief. You made us look incompetent on purpose. You wasted our time, our nights. Richard pointed at Ariana, voice breaking. She hacked the system. This is illegal. You're going to believe a child? Ariana didn't flinch. Then you should see who else is watching. One more click. A live feed appeared. The garage, the screen, Richard's face, comments flooding in, numbers climbing, hundreds, thousands, people recognizing names, sharing stories. This was never meant to be private, Ariana said softly. Truth doesn't survive in the dark. Richard's hands shook now. His voice dropped to a whisper. Turn it off. Ariana watched him for a long moment. Then she said the words that ended everything he thought he controlled. It's already too late. For the first time since he walked in, Richard Cole looked small. The screen on Ariana's laptop glowed brighter as the live stream stabilized, and in that instant, the garage stopped being a private space. It became a courtroom, not one built of marble and oak, but of witnesses, memory, and truth long denied. The red live indicator blinked quietly in the corner, almost polite, as if unaware of the damage it was about to cause. Ariana adjusted the angle just enough to capture everything. The Porsche, the code, Richard Cole's face. She began to scroll. Emails appeared first. Chains of messages stamped with dates, logos, internal headers. Calm, professional language outlining something anything but innocent. Instructions on which failures to ignore, which diagnostics not to pursue. Time limits designed to guarantee defeat. Frank leaned closer, reading in silence as his jaw tightened. Derek's hands curled into fists at his sides. These weren't theories anymore. They were orders. Ariana clicked again. Contracts surfaced next, neat and unmistakable. Buyback agreements, software notes, margin projections, and then the transfers, numbers, percentages, names. Richard Cole's name sat there, undeniable, surrounded by proof. 15% per vehicle, a reward for every customer told their car was hopeless, for every mechanic made to look incompetent, for every family sent home without answers. The comments exploded. That's him. He charged me thousands. My car died exactly 3 months in. I lost my job because I couldn't get to work. Someone call the authorities. This is fraud. This is evil. The words stacked faster than anyone could read them, raw and furious, years of frustration finally finding a voice. The crowd wasn't just watching, they were remembering. Richard stumbled backward, shaking his head. This is manipulation, he shouted, desperation cracking his voice. She's a hacker, a criminal. You can't trust stolen data. Ariana didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She turned the laptop slightly, revealing the sender addresses, the timestamps, the confirmations. Stolen data doesn't match bank records, she said calmly. And it doesn't confess. She played the final clip. Richard's own words filled the garage, played back without mercy. His earlier jokes, his dismissive laughter, his certainty that no one would ever question him. The man standing there now looked nothing like the one who had walked in hours earlier. The suit was the same, but the power was gone. His face drained of color as the realization set in. This wasn't a mistake he could spin. This wasn't a problem money could bury. Frank turned to him slowly. You let us struggle on purpose. You watched us fail. You built your bonus on our backs. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder by the second. Someone in the crowd had already made the call. Ariana reached forward and ended the stream. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't fear anymore. It was final. Richard sank into a chair as if his body had simply given up. The room didn't celebrate. It didn't need to. Justice had a weight to it, and everyone could feel it pressing down, steady and unavoidable. Ariana closed her laptop and looked at him, not with anger, but with clarity. This wasn't revenge. It was exposure. The public had seen everything, and there was no hiding from it now. Sirens grew louder, then closer, until their echo wrapped around the garage like a final sentence being read aloud. No one stopped them. No one needed to. Richard Cole sat motionless, his shoulders slumped, staring at the floor as if the concrete might open up and swallow him whole. The man who had once commanded rooms with a glance now looked painfully ordinary, stripped of certainty, stripped of control. His phone buzzed once, then again, then went silent. Whatever power he had left was dissolving in real time. By the end of the week, his name was everywhere. Headlines replaced his reputation with words like investigation, fraud, and corporate sabotage. The chain of garages he once ruled was seized and audited, accounts frozen, contracts terminated, friends stopped calling, the tailored suits disappeared, traded for court dates and legal counsel. The world he built on silence and intimidation collapsed under the weight of its own records. Across town, the same story played very differently. Cameras lined the entrance of IronHill Auto Garage, their lenses hungry for a new kind of narrative. Reporters asked about the girl who uncovered what seasoned professionals missed, about the child who exposed a system designed to fail. Ariana stood beside her father, quiet but composed, answering only what mattered. She didn't boast. She didn't dramatize. She explained. Patterns, preparation, opportunity. Her calm unsettled people more than anger ever could. The garage never closed. Instead, it changed. The lifts stayed up. The tools stayed busy. But something else shifted too. The fear was gone. In its place was purpose. Customers returned, some with apologies, others with gratitude. Mechanics worked differently now, questioning assumptions, checking deeper, trusting curiosity instead of habit. What was once a threatened workplace became a symbol of resistance against a system that had quietly failed so many. Derek watched it all with a pride that words couldn't touch. The space where he had once felt powerless now carried his family's name, not as a victory over someone else, but as proof of what happens when truth is allowed to surface. As for Ariana, the attention followed her everywhere. Interviews, invitations, questions far bigger than her age. She handled them the same way she handled the Porsche, methodically, without panic. She understood something most people learn too late. Intelligence doesn't need permission, and justice doesn't need volume. It only needs light. In the end, the most powerful thing wasn't that Richard Cole lost everything. It was that he lost it to someone he never believed could challenge him. And that realization would stay with him far longer than any sentence ever could. Months later, Ariana stood on a quiet stage surrounded by screens instead of engines, speaking to rooms filled with engineers, researchers, and executives who now listened when she talked. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words carried the weight of experience, not theory. She spoke about systems that fail people by design, about patterns hidden in plain sight, about how the biggest threats are often ignored because they come from places power refuses to look. The applause came long and loud, but Ariana didn't linger in it. Her mind was already somewhere else. She returned to IronHill Auto Garage, the place where everything had begun. The smell of oil was the same. The floor still bore the marks of decades of work, but the air felt different now, lighter, purposeful. The garage had become more than a business. It was a classroom, a testing ground, a doorway. Young people from the neighborhood gathered there after school, learning skills no one had ever expected them to master, taught not just how machines work, but how systems lie. Ariana helped launch a training fund built right there on the same concrete floor where she had once been mocked, not as charity, but as investment, in curiosity, in preparation. In minds that had been underestimated for far too long, she never framed it as revenge, she framed it as correction. What started as one moment of public humiliation became a shift far larger than any single person. A reminder that intelligence doesn't always announce itself, that brilliance often grows quietly, in overlooked places, waiting for the wrong person to push it into the light. Prejudice didn't just blind Richard Cole, it made him careless, and that was his greatest mistake. Ariana understood something the system had forgotten. When you judge people by assumptions instead of attention, you stop protecting yourself from the truth. Prejudice doesn't just harm those it targets, it weakens those who rely on it. And if this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of a time you were underestimated or ignored, take a moment to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because sometimes the greatest advantage you can have is being underestimated. Prejudice makes people blind, and blind systems always fail.